Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samech Hey Amud Aleph, starting with Samech Dalet Amud Beis, the very last line of the Amud. The Gemara had just previously taught us in regards to Yayin, a person should not render a halachic decision when he has drinking a revis of Yayin. Similarly, a person should not mispalel after drinking wine. We also learned how a person can sober himself up after drinking wine. Now the Gemara continues on the subject of inebriation. Omar Rav Sheishes Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Yachal ani liftor es kol ha'olam kuloi min adin miyom shechara beis hamikdash vad achshav. Says Rav Shimon Yochai, I can absolve a person from judgment in the future for the averas that he might have performed from the time of the Churban Beis Hamikdash until today. Shenemar brings a pasuk, Lochein shimu no zois. Therefore, please listen to this, Aniya, poor one, Ushchuras v'lo miyayin, and one who is inebriated but not from wine. In other words, from the time of the Galus of after Churban Beis Hamikdash, the Jewish people were tarried and tarud and given all types of nisyonos, which be an excuse to absolve them from the averes they might have been performed and then not done according to the will of Hashem. Meisvei asked the Gemara from the following brisa: is that going to be an argument to absolve a person from his averos? Shikor mekchoy mekach umimkar mimkar. We see from the brisa that a shikor, his mekach is a mekach, and his memkar is a memkar. In other words, he's held accountable for his business dealings, even if he is shikor. The Brisa goes on to say, if indeed a person does an aver that carries with it capital punishment, he's given capital punishment. He's going to be killed, even though he was shikor. It's not going to be an excuse. The Brisa continues, Malkin oisoi. If he is chayiv malkis, for example, he was over a lav, he ate meat and milk together, he ate non-kosher food, and he gets then a hasra, he's warned, and he says afal pikein, he goes and he eats the cheeseburger or whatever it is. That person then is chayiv malkis. He was shikor, he's going to get malkis, lashes. The Brisa concludes, Klolo shel davar, harehu kepikeach lekol dvorov. He's like somebody who's a pikeach. He's not going to be excused as a shikur. Ela shepoter min tefillah, but rather he's only going to be poter from the kavanas halev in tefillah. Ma yichon liftor de kamar. In which case, what was Rav Shimon Yochai saying that a person will be poter when he is shikr? He's not going to be potter from his averos. We see from the Brisa he's going to be held accountable. Answers the Gemara, Nami bidin tefillah. He's going to be potter from the din of tefillah when he didn't daven with the proper kavana. Because after all, once the Churban Beis Hamikdash took place, Klal Yisrael no longer has the same Yishuv Hadas. When they're not davening with the proper kavana, there'll be an excuse to absolve them from not davening properly with the proper kavana. Of course, we have to try to the best of our ability to daven with kavana. We have to try to train ourselves and practice and so on by putting effort. But nonetheless, if a person does daven here and there or whatever it is without kavana, the proper kavanas halev, he'll have a petur, he'll have an excuse. Omer Rav Chanina said, Lo shonu ela shelo higia l'shikrusa shel loit, aval higia l'shikrusa shel loit, poter mikulam. This is providing that a person did not reach the level of shichrus like Lot. That's when the Brisa says a person is going to be held accountable for his mekach or memkar, for his averos, his chayav misa or malkis. But if he reached the level of shichrusai of Lot, then he has the din of a shoite, and he's going to be potter. Rav Chanina said, Kol hamefik mogein b'shaz gaiva. Anybody who skips over, Mogain is a reference to Mogain Avram, Tfilah Shmona Esrei, when he is B'Shaz Gaiva, the time of his pride refers to when he is inebriated. Soigrin v'choismin soros be'adoi. They will min hashomayim close and seal soros, difficulties from being visited upon him. Shenemar brings a pasuk, Gaiva afike maginim. When one is inebriated and he is then passing over the maginim, it's a drasha on the word maginim on those that are shielding, referring to Magen Avram Tefillah. Soger choisim tsar. Then mina shamayim, they will close and seal the difficulties, the yisurim, the tsaros. My mashma as the Gemara dahai afik lishna de abure hu. Where is it mashma that the word afik refers to bypassing over and skipping over tefillah, that a person will then be given the protection of from tsaros? The Siva says in the pasuk, Achai bogdu, my brothers have been disloyal. Kmo nachal kafik nacholim ya'avaru, like the movements of the waters that have passed over. So therefore, these channels of water that are passing over, this is a reference to mefik being something that bypasses when a person therefore passes over the tefillah. Rabbi Yochanan learns the lashon to be different, and therefore he says kol she'enoi mefik itmar. When one is not expressing mefik, that was what he was talking about. He's going to take a protection from then the yisurim, from the tsaros. My mashma dahai mefik lishna de giluihu. Where do we see that the lashon of mefik refers to expressing? And therefore, when Rabbi Yochanan says those who do not express their tefillah will then get protection from tsaros. Dirshu, it says in the pasuk, "Vayerau afike mayim," that the afike mayim, the channels of the water, become visible. Vayigolu moistois tevel, and the foundations of earth are revealed. So you see that mefik refers to reveal, expressing. Michti, the Gemara says, let us see. Kroi mashma ben lamar ben lamar. The pasuk is mashma both according to this opinion and that opinion. Ask the Gemara, my beinayu. So what's the difference between the two? Answers the Gemara the following difference. Ika beinayu de Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes, he would tell, after drinking and going to sleep, he would tell his shamish to wake him up when it's time for tefillah. That means he held that a little bit of sleeping is enough to sober him up, to allow him to go ahead and daven. So therefore, the first opinion of Rav Chanina, that opinion of Rav Chanina, who says that it's passing over the tefillah, that does not go like Rav Sheshes, because passing over means it has to be a complete sleep without being interrupted, without being woken up. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan would stay like Rav Sheshes. The Rav Sheshes Mosa Shinse Lishamei. For Rav Sheshes, he would pass over, he would pass, meaning in this case, he would give over his Shena, his sleep, to his Shamish by telling him to wake him up. Mar Islay, Rav Yochanan would hold like Rav Sheshes, or Mar Leslay Rav Sheshes, and Rav Chanina would not hold like Rav Sheshes. Says the Gemara, Vaiter Omar Rav Chia Bar Ashi Omar Rav. If a person doesn't have Yishuv Hadas, he should not daven. Mishum shenemar, it says in the pasuk, and it's really not a pasuk, that's the truth. It's not a pasuk in Tanakh, it's a statement. Botzar al yoire. Botzar, he shall not render a halachic decision. So therefore, davening is like making a halachic decision. Perhaps we can say that the word be mispalel is reflexive. And the word mispalel means to judge. To judge who? To judge oneself. So giving a halachic decision, that cannot be done when one has drunk. So too, a person who drinks and a person also who does not have Yishuv Hadas shall not daven. Rav Chanina b'yoyma derotach lo matzali. He says that a day that he is angry, he would not daven, because he wouldn't have the proper, again, Yishuv Hadas to pray, to daven. Omar botzar al yorei ksiv. He says, botzar al yorei, it is written. And therefore, a person should not go ahead and daven, he says, if a person is in a state of anger because he doesn't have Yishuv Hadas. Mar ukva b'yoyim deshusa lo have nafik le'bedina. In the Yomi Deshuka, in the Yomi rather Deshusa, in a southern wind, a stormy wind, he would not go to the Bezdin to adjudicate because he would think he would not have the Yishuv Hadas, the proper Yishuv Hadas, the mindset to then give judgment. Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak hilchasa boya tzilusa b'yoyim deistana. He says, Hilchasa, a halacha, is boya, it requires a clear mind, like a day that has southern clear winds and a clear day, a sunny day. Because a person has to have, again, Yishuv Hadas, clarity of thought, to then plummet the depths of halacha. Amar Abaye said, I amra li aim, kariv kutcha, Lotanoi. Abai, who was a Yasoim, who was raised by the woman that raised him, he refers to him as his mother, his aim. And he says, when she would say to me, bring me a certain dish, a kutcha, that was made in Bavel, he says, I would not be able to learn even a small, medial type of activity that itself would ruin his Yishuv Hadas. Omar Rava said, if lice were to be killed, then that would also prevent me from learning. That also would then ruin my Yishuv Hadas. That's how sensitive he was. His mother would make him 7 garments for 7 days of the week, that the lice should not be killed and be then preventing him from learning. He'll have 7 different garments, one for each day. He says, night was created for sleep, so that a person then has the strength and the clarity of thought to then toil in the Torah during the day. Rav Shimon Lakish says, the moon was created in order to then learn. In other words, the moon is like a night light. It provides light enough for a person to then be able to then go ahead and learn. So therefore, the moon was created for Girsa. Omrei le Rabbi Zeir. They said to Rabbi Zeir, Mechadadin shmaitich. Your shmaitich, your halachic rulings are sharp. What do you then attribute to? Omar Lu, he said to them, the Yamamid Ninhu. He said they were made during the day. Because I would toil during the day when I have energy and Yishuv Hadas, that made me then sharp in my halachic decisions. Omri leilabarte, the Rav Chizda, the daughter of Rav Chizda said to him, Loi boy mar minem purta. Are you not going to then sleep a little bit? She encouraged him to sleep. Omar Allah, he would say to his daughter, Hashdo, Osu Yomi. Now there's going to be a day that would come, referring to the day of the Kever. The Arichi Viktini. It's going to be long. And it's also going to be short. It's going to be long that I'm going to sleep a lot in the kever, but it's going to be short that I'm not going to be learn and do mitzvahs in the kever. V'ninum tuva, and I'm going to sleep plenty. That's what his response was to his daughter. Omer Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Anon poyale diyamama anon. We are day laborers. In other words, we are meshubad to our employer during the day, and therefore all of our waking hours during the day is being used to then learn the Torah and to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his mitzvahs. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Yazif Upora. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, he would borrow and pay. In other words, he would have a certain amount of learning to be accomplished, a certain quota for that day. If he had to then make parnasa, he would not be able to finish that quota. He would borrow, so to speak, and pay it back that night, so that he would then learn the quota that he then was supposed to do that previous day. Om Rabbi Elozar haba min haderech al yispalel shloisha yomim. A person, going back to kavonas halev in tefillah, when a person comes back from his journey, he shall not daven for 3 days. Shneimar brings a pasuk, ve'akabtzem el hanahar. I will gather them in to the nahar. Habo el achvo, that will come to the area called achvo. V'nachne sham yomim shloisha, and I will rest there for 3 days. Ve'avina bo'am, and then I will then analyze the nation. So you see that when a person is coming back from his travels, he needs to have 3 days to miyashiv his das. Bismanenu, again, we don't have kavanas halev to the extent that they had, not even close to what they had when they would daven, and therefore we have no excuse when we come back from a travel. Avud Shmuel ki osi ba'orcha le'matzli tlasa yomi. The father of Shmuel, he would come from his journey and he would not daven for 3 days. Shmuel lo matzli bebeisa di'is be'shichro. Shmuel would not even daven in a room that had sheikhar, because the smell of the sheikhar could then cause his mind not to be settled. He can get a little bit drunk from it. Rav Papa lo matzli bebeisa di'is be'harsina. Rav Papa would be bothered by the smell of fried fish, and therefore he would not daven in such a house. Rav Chanino kol hamispate b'yeino yesh bo midas koinoi. Somebody who is going to then be mispayes, he's going to then allow himself to be appeased when he drinks. He is going to be like his creator, who was appeased also, as it states in the following pasuk, Shenemar, Vayarach Hashem ezreach hanichoyach. After Hashem brought the flood onto the world and destroyed the world, and Noach and his family survived, it says that Noach brought korbanos to Hashem, and it says Hashem smelled the reach hanichoyach of these korbanos, and then he took a oath that he's not going to destroy the world with a flood again. So he was appeased. So too, when it comes to somebody who is appeased with his yayin, just as we said before, when a person smells sheikhar, that person can become drunk. So too, the smelling of the reach nichoyach of the korbanos, that's going to be then a person who is appeased with his drinking. When he drinks, his mind is going to then help him to be appeased by the other person. He's going to be like his creator who was appeased by the reach hanichoyach. Somebody who has yishuv hadas, when he drinks, he doesn't drink to get drunk, to be wild, but his drinking allows him to have yishuv hadas, like we saw before. That we saw that Rav Nachman said, when I drink a revis of yayin, it helps me have a clarity that I'm able to then render a halachic decision because it helps me to think clearly. So a person who drinks only to a small extent to allow him to then have more clarity, he's like 70 elders, like the Sanhedrin. Yayin niten ba'ayin oisios, v'soid niten ba'ayin oisios. Yayin has the gematria of 70. Yud and Nun, 10, 10, and 50 is 70. It's the same gematria as soid, which is samich 60, vav 6, and dalid 4, which is 70. Nichnas yayin yotza soid. When yayin comes in, then the soid of the person comes out, and therefore a person who is on a high level, when he drinks, then the goodness comes out. Rav Chanin, lo nivra yayin elo lenachem avelim uleshalem schar lerishoyim. He says wine was created only for being menachem, comforting the mourners, and for giving the rishoyim their good times in this world. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk. I'll read the entire pasuk. It says, Tnu sheichar la'oived, give sheichar to the oived, the one who is losing, the one who is destroying, meaning he's destroying himself. He's the one who loses out. The rasha, instead of him being paid off in the next world with olam haba, we'll give him a little bit of olam hazeh to pay him off here in this world. And the rest of the pasuk goes on to say, "V'yayin lemare nefesh," and give yayin, wine, to those who are mare nefesh, referring to the avelim. It lifts their spirits, so they don't come to a depression. So therefore, the yayin was given to them as well. Amar Rav Chanin bar Pape, kol she'ein yayin nishbach betoich beisoy kemayim. Any person who does not have his wine being spilled like water in that house, eino bechlal bracha. He hasn't reached the level of the ideal bracha. Shneimar states, ubeirachas lachmecha ves meimecha. The pasuk says, and you will bless your lechem and your water. The Gemara explains, Ma lechem shenikne bekesef meiser, af mayim shenikach bekesef meiser. Just as lechem can be used to be used for the meiser sheni money, you can be paid the money of the meiser sheni and bring it to Yerushalayim and buy food and go ahead and buy lechem. But so too, when it comes to the water, you can also do that. But we know you cannot be then paid your yayin. You're not able to then go ahead and use and buy yayin with kesef meiser. Sorry, buy mayim, buy water with kesef meiser. So what does it mean over here that there's a comparison to your lechem and your mayim when it comes to meiser sheni? What does it mean that you can go ahead and take the kesef, the meiser sheni, just as you do to buy lechem, you can go ahead and buy water with it? Explains the Gemara. My nihu yayin v'kakar le mayim. This is a reference to yayin, to wine, but it's called water. In what sense is it like water? Explains the Gemara on Daf Samechei Amud Beis at the top. Nishbach mi beisoi kemayim ika bracha v'iloi loi. If it is spilled, the wine is spilled like water in your house, then you'll get bracha, that ultimate bracha. And if not, not. The Gemara now concludes its discussion of drinking wine with the following mimer. Va'omar Rabbi Eloi b'shloisha dvarim adam nikar. You want to see who a person is? Then you can find out in 3 different ways how he is recognizable, how he is nikar. Bekoisoi, the way he drinks. If he drinks and he doesn't get wild, but rather he drinks and he has yishuv adas, it's nichnas yayim v'yotzei soid, then you know who he is by drinking the wine, how he then behaves. Ubekisoi, and with his pocketbook, what does he do with his money? How does he deal with business dealings? Is he noisev v'noisen be'emuna? Is he giving tzedakah and doing chesed with his money? And finally, ubekaisoi,